Today we're going to discuss how to remove and how not to remove cables installation. I'm going to show you two methods of doing that. One is right and the other one is very wrong. Then I'm going to explain you why the right is right and the wrong is wrong. Finally, based on those two examples, we're going to draw some conclusions about how to use players and some other automated methods for cables installation removal. Let's go. Here's the first method. It looks pretty logical, doesn't it? I've seen many people using it. The whole thing looks somehow clean and proper, right? Then this is the second one. So, which one is the right one? Let's test it. Now we are gonna try the integrity of the wire after each method of cables insulation removal. Why is this happening and what does it mean for the connection we make? Let's have a closer look. Here you can see what the knife has done on the wire in the first case. You can clearly see the indentation. It is very tiny, but is there. And no matter how small it is enough to damage the integrity of the whole wire. There is no such traces in the second case. The cable connections we make last decades. A connection is never like a cable without a connection. There is always a transactional resistance and commutation currents on the spot of the connection. That creates heat, and heat leads to oxidation and wear and tear of the material of the wire. At some point, the wires and the connections must be replaced with new ones, because they stop working properly. Having indentments on the connections drastically reduces their life. The connection could burn at the weak spot in a couple of years, especially if the electrical charge is high. Now, when you already have the basics, it's not very difficult to draw some conclusions about how to use tools for installation removal. First and foremost, always use the right size of the tool. If you have a cable gauge 12, for example, always use the hole for cable gauge 12 and not the one for cable gauge 16, because the smaller size of the tool will certainly harm the copper wire. Second, always use high quality tools. Some low quality tools could have wrong size holes, which could harm your cables. As a rule of thumb, every time you buy a new tool, test it how it works, and if it harms the cable, simply don't use it. Finally, when it comes to small repairs, always use the correct manual way I showed you in the beginning. This is by far the best method for removing cables installation. There is perfection in simplicity. Well, that was all for today, folks. I hope you learned something useful. Take care.